Well, hello YouTube. This is just a quick video I thought I would tack together because it was something I wish I had found yesterday when I was at a client site trying to upgrade a few machines to SSD. So if you're trying to upgrade an HP Pavillion 24 B239, just have a quick skim through this and you may get some hints that could be useful. So the basic issue with this thing is there's not a lot of information available on how to get it open, and sometimes you can find stuff on YouTube, but the stuff I was finding didn't help. It was not technical. And there's a whole lot of different models of all-in-ones from HP, and they're all slightly different. And the procedures used are sometimes useful, but you sometimes run into surprise models, and today's was a bit of a surprise. So the first challenge is that the case on this thing is pretty tight, and it is a bit of a job to case crack it and get it open. And in order to get that first challenge done, you have to deal with the other challenge, which is that the way the stand is attached to the case is very close quarters, and you can't use a full length Torx driver, assuming you're using a normal length screwdriver, to open the four screws and release the bracket so that you can take the stand off. So I ended up using a workaround because I only had a limited set of tools with me since I was at a client site and I didn't have all my stuff. Fortunately, a 2.5mm Torx worked, and I held it using a pair of needle nose pliers to get enough torque so that I could turn the thing. And with that arrangement, I was able to get the screws out. So the screws are quite short. There's four of them, and they're very tight, but once you get the initial turn done, then they just come right out, no problem. And when it's done, the bracket looks like this. It just lifts right off, super easy. And this is what the bracket mounts onto inside the chassis. Those are the 4 points where the screws go in. This is with the back lifted off, so it won't look exactly like this. I didn't have enough time when I was at my client site to take a ton of photos or videos, so I just had a few snapshots. That's why this is a bit of a funny video, but anyway, this is what it's going to look like when you get the bracket off and the back open. When the whole unit is open, just for reference, this is what it looks like. You're going to notice the optical drive is on the back panel and only attached by one wire that runs down to the main body. So you can totally ignore the optical drive. It doesn't get in the way for ripping the back off at all. And some other comments. The hard drive is held in place in a nice straightforward sled. This unit did have a 3.5-inch drive in its stock factory config. I think it was a 2 terabyte drive. And it's easy enough to pop that out, and then you can put in an SSD. There's mount brackets for SSD if you have the correct screws, and if you don't, then you might improvise something like a cable tie, who knows. So some basic hints for this whole thing. Clear your work area and put a towel or something down to protect the face of the screen because you don't want to scratch it up. There's going to be 2 rubber plugs facing you on the bottom edge of the display, and you can pop those out and it'll expose 2 screws that are kind of like Phillips and kind of like flathead compatible. Either will work. I think I ended up using a Phillips screwdriver. I found another YouTube video that suggested a quarter turn counterclockwise to release these things. I'm not entirely certain I understand how these suckers work, but anyway, that appeared to do it. You get a weird pop bulge on the case when you do this, and then that gives you enough of a crack apart from the 2 faces of the clamshell that you can get into the thing. You have to deal with getting rid of the 4 2.5mm Torx screws to get the bracket off for the stand, and then once that's fully done, the bracket lifts right off. Once the bracket's out of the picture, you're good to pop the case open, and I would recommend, if you can, use some kind of case cracking tool, either an official one or a guitar pick, or maybe even like a a bread bag twisty tag. You could arguably use a small screwdriver really carefully because you don't want to damage the case plastic. Something that's thin, rigid plastic works really well for this if you have it. So you're going to start at the bottom edge of the case near one of the 2 screws that you quarter turn to pop the thing, and you can work your way between those and try to wedge something in there that's suitable plastic if you need to help hold it open. Then work your way out to the corners and then keep going around. You've got to pry this thing carefully, and it all does pop apart. Be attentive when you're at the bottom edge, you don't want to pry off the thin metal on the front, which is actually holding over the where the speakers are mounted underneath the monitor display. They're kind of a red herring, and if you pry those by accident, you're going to warp the metal a little bit, so be careful. This thing is a tight fit. It's very much like popping open a laptop that's been assembled by someone who really does not want you to take it apart. Once the whole clamshell pops apart, you literally just lift the back off and then stand it up with something supporting it from behind. Because of the way the cable comes down from the optical drive, you cannot just lay them side by side or both flat on the deck. The cable isn't long enough. So think about that before you rip it open, or pop this thing open when you're working against a wall so that you can stand up the back against the wall or something like that. Once you got it open, the hard drive cage is just held in place with one retainer screw. It's really marked clearly. There's some stamp embossing on the sled. You just look at the sled and it'll give you the hints. And then there's a single unique power plug thing that has both power and SATA. That pops off, and then you can lift the sled out, and then there's 4 regular screws holding the hard drive in place. You can rip the hard drive out and swap in your 2.5-inch SSD, cable tie it or screw it in depending on what you got, and then put things back together. Closing up the clamshell, you just have to line things up and reseat it. I start by leaning down the top edge into place and then closing the clamshell down. Pay attention to where the power button is, because the power button is purely on the exterior clamshell side as a little piece of plastic that boops in, and then the micro switch is on the other half, the main body of the clamshell, and if those two things aren't lined up nice, then your power switch won't work. But you have to really try to mess that up, but just be careful about it. Once you got the thing closed up, be sure to apply gentle but firm pressure around all the edges to close up all your case snaps that you had to pop open to get this thing ripped open. And then finally remount the stand with the 4 short range screws that have to go in, and then you got the 2 screws at the bottom edge with your quarter turn or whatever the hell it is to make them work nicely, and then rubber plugs to close them over. If you're being careful and attentive and you're doing like a standard SSD drive clone swap procedure, you might want to test the thing with the SSD drive installed before you close up the full case, just in case something isn't happy. It would be nice not to have to rip it open a second time. And for me, I found the 2 screws at the bottom edge were a little bit weird, but anyway. Overall, this is probably the messiest all-in-one system I've ever upgraded. I've seen other ones which are awesomely easy. You know, they have a little thing that you go slip, slide, pop, and there's a hatch, and you can get in at the memory and the drive, and yay, really good and easy. This is not one of those. Some things are not meant to be upgraded, but anyway. Some shout-outs, comments, and whatever. HP for when they make their machines easier to upgrade. This is not one of them. Another guy had a nice YouTube video for another HP all-in-one, which had some similar design aspects, including the 2 screws at the bottom edge. The day that I did this work, I used a nice free tool from the folks who produce Mini Tool, so Mini Tool Partition Wizard. I had forgotten how nice this guy was. It works really smoothly, it's free. They have a non-free version that you could buy if you wanted to, and the cloning process was straightforward. It did have to reboot, but it does its own little bootloader magic, and it works very smoothly, no drama. And I even used it on another machine that had some bad sectors, and some different drive cloning tools choked out on the bad sectors, but Mini Tool just sailed through it, no problems. So yay, good stuff, Mini Tool. Other shoutouts to puppies and flowers and bumblebees and kids and who knows what. I'm being silly, clearly. And in case it's not clear, nobody gave me anything to make this video, and I'm not being endorsed or supported or promoted by anyone, certainly not HP. And, you know, if you take my hints here at your own risk, etc., etc., and have fun. And thank you for watching, and hooray for YouTube for letting us put this kind of stuff so that we can help get stuff done. Toodles.